prayer and doubt go so close together. It seems like it's almost to the core. And so I want to take some time to speak to even unanswered prayer and the feelings that we might have, the emotions, the intellectual sort of assent that we struggle with when we pray. And so right now I'm just going to give you kind of what we put in the prayer guide, but this is going to be an audio or video version, however you're interacting. And so we're going to read Mark 9, verses 14 to 21. It's really helpful, I believe. It says this in Mark 9. When they came to the other disciples, that's Jesus, they saw a large crowd around the disciples and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. "What are you arguing about?" he asked. A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashing his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "You unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long shall I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion, and he fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," the father answered. "It has often thrown him into fire or to water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," Jesus said, "everything is possible for the one who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw the crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you to come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked and convulsed violently and came out, and the boy looked so much like a corpse that the man said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him to his feet, and he stood up. After Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" And Jesus replied, "This kind can come out only by prayer." Anguish and debates about the reality of Jesus don't happen at festive resorts. Anguish happens in the muted silence of a hospital room turned into a morgue. Debates rage within us when the world outside looks like a world we never wanted to know. Confidence in his kingdom wanes as the kingdoms of this world rage towards destruction and a distortion while they meet little resistance. We wrangle with Jesus when he appears absent, or worse, apathetic. In the Old Testament, there's a story about Elijah, a prophet of Yahweh, who's confronting the prophets of a fake and pagan god, Baal. And both groups build altars and they cry out to their God to respond and to consume, and asking their gods to consume their sacrifice. And it's a test. It's a competition, really. The prophets of Baal begin to beat themselves. They beat themselves up, hoping that their God will hear them. And they go on and on for hours. And then Elijah begins to taunt them. He says, "Maybe your God is on vacation and can't hear you. Maybe your God is asleep and is tired. Maybe your God is deep in thought and needs to be jolted." As he shouts and jeers, it creates sort of a desperation among these prophets, but nothing happens. Baal is silent. And the story ends when Elijah prays once and Yahweh responds emphatically. And it's a great chorus and, celebration of the people. But often with prayer, doesn't the experience of the prophets of Baal resonate more than the experience of Elijah? Maybe Jesus is asleep. Maybe he's distracted with someone else. Maybe he's deep in thought. Maybe I don't matter. Maybe he doesn't matter. Where is he? We pray, we plead, we beg. Why doesn't he say anything? Maybe he can't. Maybe he doesn't want to. Maybe he doesn't care. This is doubt. This is the agony of prayer. Yet we can't quit Jesus, or at least we don't. We're still here in community and DNA, part of a church. There's something about Jesus that will not allow us to walk away altogether. We debate in our Bible studies, we talk with leaders in living rooms, we opine with close friends. We have many doubts, but this is the main one. Where is Jesus? Some people say they experience him all the time. Why doesn't he arrive in my life? Why doesn't he heal? Why didn't he say anything? Some of us leave religion altogether. We leave church, we progress, and yet, in the silence, we still yearn for Jesus' voice or an image of his kingdom in our world. These are moments our senses catch the scent of Jesus' hope, and it takes us to a familiar place, a familiar setting of peace. And the harrowing moments of heartache when God is silent and his activity is unseen. We say with certainty, I believe and I don't believe. At the exact center of Mark's gospel, we're introduced to this father who has now seen a lifelong demonstration of brokenness in his child. Time refused to heal, medicines were falling short, and even his own vigilance and care couldn't prevent his son from nearly dying through burning and drowning. He likely lied awake at night, staring at his son in terror at what the next day or hour might bring for his precious child. He correctly describes his son's state as evil and beyond this world's knowledge and intention. The father knows his son was not supposed to be this way. He wasn't made for this kind of torture. And this is the agony of having confidence that something is broken without the conviction that something can make it whole. For me, the greatest challenges of doubt arrive not from my own direct pain, but the indirect pain of those I love. The friend in addiction, the mentor battling cancer, and the internal demons that repeatedly steal life from those that I truly love. When the nations are torn apart, when racism doesn't quit, when the climate deteriorates, or when the pandemic doesn't cease. Nothing I do helps them. Nothing I hope in comes through. And there in the quiet and internal chaos, I resign myself to a phrase like this father's. I believe something could change, but I also don't believe. Do we suffer from some sort of cognitive multiple belief disorder? Shouldn't we land on one side or the other? If this father didn't believe, why would he ask Jesus to help? If this man did believe, why did he say, if you can, help us? In a world of binary knowledge and belief, facts versus faith, how do we land so awkwardly in this other place? I believe, help my unbelief. Doubt in the Gospels of Jesus is the absence of full confidence and the reliance on truth before you. It's an absence of full confidence and an absence of a reliance on the truth before you. In Matthew, Peter famously walks on water to Jesus. And while Jesus strolls on waves towards his friend, Peter jumps in. Or rather, Peter jumps onto the water. It is unequivocally a moment of trust and adoration in Jesus. It's childlike in every sense. And as the two walk toward each other on the water, Peter loses full confidence. He questions, he falters, he sinks. Matthew says, Peter doubted. He loved Jesus, he trusted Jesus. Jesus walked towards him on the sea, yet alongside all of those feelings, Peter didn't trust him. Peter wasn't sure of his love. And Peter wasn't confident in his own walking. Matthew tells us the truth. Peter was afraid. Finding himself beyond his physical and emotional capacity, he cries out to Jesus, Jesus, save me. Jesus rebuffs our inclinations to chastise someone who failed so miserably. Jesus lifts Peter up and out of the water, and he questions him. Why did you doubt? Jesus answers his own question just a few moments later. You have little faith. We want to have a lot of everything, but Jesus says we only need a bit of one thing to change everything: faith. Jesus said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to the mountains, move from here to there, and they will move. Nothing will be impossible for you. Could it be Jesus isn't looking for perfect buttoned up, tightly packaged, and unwavering conviction, but instead has become that perfect, unwavering conviction for us. He isn't confused about his moments. He isn't wavering in his conviction to give himself for us. While we explore the measures of his claims and we analyze the historical evidence about him to decipher his reality and debate with our friends, God is unmoved in his intention to move mountains for us. While we sink and flail in the storm, he walks eagerly towards us, responding to our anxious cry, "Lord, save me." While we hold our children, he asks us questions and draws out our hearts. Do we have the smallest of faiths to say, "If you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us"? Do we have enough, just a little faith, to cry out for salvation in the midst of a bleak world? Sometimes doubt protects us. "I'm not sure what I believe about that," keeps us in control, creates distance between us and something that might reveal us to be foolish. If we can maintain a passive doubt of uncertainty, we don't have to place ourselves underneath Jesus' rule or anything else. Autonomy is the fruit of proclaimed uncertainty and unprocessed doubt. Often doubt shields us from being let down. I don't believe God can heal. Now I won't be disappointed when he doesn't. Yet the Father turns to Jesus with a mixture of doubt and faith and asks for help for his Son and for himself. Perhaps belief is just that humble awareness that you cannot do anything to save yourself or others, and so you cry out to Jesus to save you. Maybe this is how we pray amidst our doubts. In desperation, returning to God again. Masterfully, Mark juxtaposes this father's unbelief with the disciples' futility in practicing belief, or their lack of practicing belief. We know this much because they and the crowds received Jesus' rebuke. He says, "You unbelieving generation, how long should I stay with you? How long should I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." They don't argue back with this. Jesus is right. They are unbelieving. If you're lacking belief, you're in a crowded room with similar saints. Matthew, Levi, Andrew, Thomas, Mary, Martha, John the Baptist, and a whole group of followers who had walked with Jesus at the very start and are now remembered in cathedrals from Rome to Singapore. The names of these cynic saints have become immortalized in great cities, on roads, and even a few soccer stadiums bear their names. The doubting of the diehards compels us to consider, why does it feel like the longer we see Jesus transform the world, the deeper we doubt in crisis? We're brought into this story with the disciples midstream. It's actually amazing, sort of suspense building, where we find the disciples enthralled in an argument with scholars. Jesus has gone off with just a few select people, a few of those disciples, where they spend time with Moses and Elijah on top of this mountain. It's amazing. They don't know when Jesus will return or what he's even doing. But then in the midst of this, a father comes to them and asks for healing. And though they've seen God work through their own hands before, through their own words before, this time it appears God is silent and they are helpless. Earlier, they'd performed miracles, just the chapter before. Now they utter ineffectual words to a desperate father amidst onlookers and naysayers. Their experience, testing, and training fails this family, and everyone around them knows it. The educated elite hit them with arguments that they can't respond to adequately. They wonder if there just truly are fishermen and tax collectors and rebels. They have unbelief. And while I've never been to Galilee, I've been exactly where these disciples were. As a pastor, I've received urgent phone calls for help. Like, my husband is cheating on me, his girlfriend is pregnant. I've lost my job and we can't buy food. I think I should kill myself. I've relapsed and my addiction has come back to destroy me. We're headed to the ER. After applying all I've learned about the kingdom and love and mercy, I'm left wondering in those situations, am I just a man talking to the air? Is none of this working? In the shame of it all, the only sensible defense seems to be arguing with those who point out the destructive letdown of my faith. We can have debates on the problem of evil and clever arguments about God's will and sovereignty and the mystery of it all. Robustly, we can point out that the opposition has a complete lack of hope. What else are you going to hope in? At least I have some. Devastatingly, though, these disciples, like us, are faced with the argument that they're able to display for everyone around the seemingly futility of our hope. This boy is still sick. The boy is still possessed. The father is still afraid. While Jesus is on the mountain, we begin our journey into argumentative despair. Why can't we do this? Why can't we get God to respond? When Jesus finally arrives, he picks up the words of Moses and Elijah. He says, "This unbelieving generation, how long must I remain with you?" And we're supposed to look at these prophets. Jesus wants us to enter into their stories. Mark wrote it so that we would. And so we'll look at Moses. Through the power of God, he liberated his people from oppression of slavery, and his people watched in amazement as God defeated Pharaoh in the Red Sea. Their tormentor was forever vanquished. They watched the armor of their enemies wash up on the shore as they began their journey toward becoming a free people in a new land. And all that stood in their way was the wilderness. But quickly, the generation of celebration became the generation of complaint. And when Moses leaves them for just a few days to go up to the mountain and experience the manifest presence of God, handwriting on stone his will, the people below leave their heritage of hope that they just had as soon as God's handiwork appears distant. They worry, they fret. The victory of God is behind them. Well, what will be ahead of them, they wonder. Surely Moses is dead. They argue with each other. In a moment of complete human honesty, they confess, we want something we can see and something we can worship. So they made a golden calf and they declared, "These are the gods who rescued us all along." In the aftermath of this abandonment of the rescuing God, Moses comes to describe them as stiff-necked. And while they were slaves in Egypt, they would have become familiar with the work of oxen to pull and carry heavy loads. They would place a yoke of wood and straps on the ox to attach to wagons as they made bricks and as they moved stuff around. With a stick or a whip, they would guide the ox to the left and to the right, to move forward and to stop. Wherever the ox's head was facing was where the whole load would go. And it became the job of the driver to use these sticks to nudge the ox's head in the right direction. But an ox who refused to even turn its head was called stiff-necked. When the people of Israel lost hope and begged for another God, they could see they were sitting at the foothills of a mountain where just above God's presence quaked in a cloud of smoke they could have seen if only they turned their heads. And perhaps this is a crucial battle of belief, deciding where we will look when life is shaken beyond our control. Will we turn to arguments about things we can see, or will we look higher? Christians are great at diving into the seen and the touchable to find security amidst the storm. Things like politics or possessions, popular culture and pleasure. We might even use spiritual language to ascribe salvation to just things in our life. It's hard to believe in the power of God when I'm looking at the power of humanity. Moses marched on with the stiff-necked generation toward the land of promise, but he died on a hill watching his people enter the land that he dreamed of. He never went in. His story ended. Moses never saw heaven touch earth until he was on the mountain top with Jesus. The kingdom of God reaching into the depths of humanity. God's story has a bigger arc than ours. Belief in Jesus is a subscription to that story, a story that bends beyond our narratives. Prayer is how we hear that story. Why couldn't we do it? We genuinely ask God. This kind comes out with prayer, Jesus says. Prayer is the tuning of our ears to the whisper of God's voice, the turning to look at his hands, and the pressing into a grander story. Where prayer reigns, evil recoils. Prayer isn't the obstruction of all doubt or the annihilation of all doubt, but it is the place where doubt breathes and lives alongside belief. Prayer is where the believer actually practices their unbelief. It isn't in couches or around fire pits or with conversations or even in books. For the believer, we go with our unbeliefs to God in prayer. The end of hope and all we can see is the beginning of an honest conversation with the God that we cannot see. Prayer is the arena where that honesty happens. The words of the Father in our story are the words of our prayers. If you can, do something. And yes, I believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. Psalm 77 gives us a window into that kind of prayer. This prayer alongside doubt. And I resonate with the passionate confession of seeking action from God. The poet bears his soul. Is your love over? Has it run out? Did you forget to care? Have you let me down? Prayer is where the believer goes to process their unbelief. If we do not go to God, we aren't actually exploring our doubts. If you're standing on the edge ready to walk away from God, at least have a conversation with him, the God of your hope. Even if you believe it's a former hope. You haven't practiced doubt until you've explored it with Jesus, like this Father, like this psalmist. Within Psalm 77, this believer's prayer doesn't completely shift away from doubt, but it does shift towards the story of God. He's reminded of the story that preceded him and the story that advances through him. They remember the activity of God. They look ahead, expecting to see God's activity again. I want you to spend some time reflecting on that. Have you ever felt doubt in your prayer life? How do you bring your doubts to God in prayer? I want you to spend some time reading Psalm 77 as a prayer to God, as the model of practicing doubt with God. As you read it, feel free to pause and turn your these words into your own words. Words of prayer, words reflecting to God, confessing your own stiff necks, trying to gaze at his handiwork, hearing his whisper. Thanks for engaging in this conversation on doubt. You can please hit me up with any questions you might have or more exploration you might want to do.